I admire you for your endurance at these critical times, but remember we've had 13 foreign ministers who want to be involved in being here at this strategic forum. You need stamina. It's a bit like long sessions in parliaments and so on. Could I invite the 5 panelists up onto the platform, please, to reward those of you who are still here. And if you want to come down and fill seats further down at the front, please do. Katarina, come and join me up on here. Katarina Barley, who is the Vice President of the European Parliament. Welcome. Hello. Hello. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. People changing names. Gordan Radman, who is the Minister for Foreign and European Affairs for Croatia. Katarina Barley, who's Vice President of the European Parliament, who is English and German. She can explain more. Péter Szijjártó from Hungary, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade. Nikos Dendias, welcome, who is the Foreign Minister for Greece. And from Bulgaria, Velislava Petrova, who is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. I have the rather unenviable job of trying to explain to those of you who've just arrived where we are, where we've got to. For others of you, this is the next stage in a long continuum, discussing where European institutions are going. Now, I'm not going to give the same introduction as I gave about an hour and a half ago for the first session, but for those of you who've mysteriously arrived here late on, it's important for you to realize the number of ministers, the number of senior people who wanted to be at the Bled Strategic Forum, even if now it's a little emptier than it was earlier and people were standing in the aisles and standing round the back. But it shows that you want to be part of discussion about the challenges for Europe. Now, I'm not going to go through the challenges again because I'd like to come to each of them in a moment and ask them to see and to define what they see the challenges as. But certainly all 5 of you, I made very clear that certainly based on the kind of things in the Bled Strategic Times and the kind of language we've seen, there is an expectation that some radical thinking needs to be done. There can't be complacency. So I'd like to shock you in that direction, to be thinking. We've talked about Ukraine and how the chaos, the weaponization of chaos from Putin has really created enormous ripples, enormous waves of uncertainty, and particularly the societal pressures that are now looming in the Northern Hemisphere and across Europe. Now, it's for you to define Europe. We're not talking about the European Union necessarily, it's about all institutions of Europe. We've talked as well about the Western Balkans and the real pressures and the expectations. And certainly the view from the Foreign Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister here in her remarks earlier on is that this is potentially existential. My word, not hers. But this is potentially existential, and she's a relatively new foreign minister, about the kind of challenges that each country faces, faced with populations who are going to be suffering extensively on food prices, food availability, gas, electricity, and all the things they take for granted, and how that's going to be handled. So I ask you to come to the floor with some thoughts on that. But as you're the first parliamentarian we've had here, Katarina, let me come to you. You're Vice President. You better explain the German-English connection, because they may be confused by your accent, which is fluently English. But I would like to understand, because she was also a parliamentarian before she came to the European Parliament, I'd like to ask what kind of feedback and worries you're getting at the moment within the Parliament about what is looming and how the political process can handle it, because we are talking about the challenges for Europe, and we're going to finish before 7:30, I should reassure you. So this is not about speeches, it's about having a conversation if you can. So, Katarina.
Thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation, of course, to the organizers. My British connection is very simple. My father is British, so my mother is English, and they were kids during the Second World War, so peace and stability is something very close to my heart. When it comes to stability and the threats to it, of course we are all extremely concerned, but I might have to say that we have experienced that whenever there are existential crises coming up, people turn towards the European Union, turn towards Europe. So I wouldn't call it a chance, it sounds so cynical, but it is, we have seen it in different situations that usually in the everyday work, Europe seems very far away and very abstract and very bureaucratic, but then something goes really fundamentally wrong, and then people turn to the European Union and say, you have to fix this. Now, of course, it's not the European Union that fixes it. It has to be the European Union with the member states to fix it. And I think, as for now, Putin wanted to create chaos, and he did, but up to now, I think we have responded very well.
Do you think it's to the satisfaction of the citizens? Do they believe that you in the European Parliament, the national parliaments, will somehow fix this?
Well, when it comes to Russian threat towards Ukraine and towards our way of life, let's put it that way, yes. Of course, we cannot cover all the damages that he's doing. Of course not. We will not be able to keep up what Edi Rama said. They just keep the prices on gas and electricity stable. We won't be able to do that, at least not for a very long time. But what we have to do at that point is a very good communication, and of course every country has to do what's in its power to make it as, well, as affordable for people as they can.
Final thought for all of you, and I'd like all of you to address this. What about the potential for societal backlash, which will really test the resilience of the institutions of Europe, including the Parliament? In other words, it's bad enough as it is, but if there is the weaponization of chaos, which Putin is imposing upon us, along with inflation, maybe up to 18%, and all the expectations, availability of food, etc., that this is going to lead to the expectation. You said that the public expects that parliaments and others can fix it, but in many ways this may not be fixable.
No, it will not. And we see especially the extremes, like in my home country, in Germany, it's of course the extreme right, but it's unfortunately also the extreme left, who already announce that they will take it to the streets. And that will become extremely dangerous for all of us, for democracy. And I think it's one way of tackling it is already now to see that this is an instrumentalization, that this is one part of the war. And our politicians are, it's also their duty now to take people along with them in this fight, which is a fight against chaos. It's a fight against, it's a part of a fight against Putin.
Velislava, would you like to come in? The view from Bulgaria. And can I just before, as you're switching on your microphone, it worked very well last time. If you want to just contribute in any way, go to YouTube, go to the streaming section, and you can send me a message which will come up on the laptop there. But don't leave it until 50 minutes from now, because then it'll be too late. So do send me a message if you can, please.
Thank you. I would pick on what you said about propagation of instability or chaos. As you said, Bulgaria is currently in a situation of political instability and next round of elections after 3 times of elections last year. And here we are really in a difficult situation where we really need to think of what solidarity means in practical terms for societies to be convinced to adhere to the values of solidarity that are, of course, very important. For us, it's been really key to try to understand how the Union can not only instill political solidarity, but can have practical mechanisms in which they can be in place. What it means for energy security. For us, we've been really heavily hit by the dependence attempt and a very strong reaction of the previous government against that dependence with Russia, but it's becoming very, very difficult to uphold this without the support of our European partners, because it's in a situation where before elections, before a heavy winter, with high inflation, with very high price of gas, it's very difficult to build any political argument that would justify to people why they have to pay three times the price when they have the option to not pay 3 times the price and actually have lower bills. And in a situation where there's already political instability, it's very hard to, even with interest, it's very hard to maintain this value of solidarity above all and acting together. So I think we really need to think, what are these mechanisms, whether they're financial, whether there are any other subsidy or systems in place in which member states would not decide for themselves. And here I want to make a reference of what we tried to do for COVID. It was a similar situation where we had to act together, have a common mechanism, but it was, again, very tempting for individual countries to then purchase for themselves. We really shouldn't make the same mistake, and we should really try to use all the mechanisms that the EU can provide, and they are there, and we have shown that they exist, but how can we implement them in those very tough times when we have countries that are already suffering from political turmoil?
Are they responsive enough? Are they urgent enough? Do you believe the system can move fast enough to stave off what may be coming down the track?
I think the system has the capacity to move on fast enough. I think we have to have more honest. It does have. We have to have more honest conversation, not try to make it very flowery and that everything is positive. We really need to try to address the direction is positive, and we have done a lot. But we should not shy away from the problems that do exist in individual member states and not try to point fingers of those that are trying to identify solutions that would work for them, but really try to help them and work together. So I think if we are more honest and direct about the problems that actually do exist, then I can be optimistic.
Nikos Dendias from Greece. What's your view about how the political system can handle this, whether in Greece or across Europe?
It is clear to me that unless we see it as a common challenge, we will not be able to address it in a way that can persuade our societies around Europe, possibly even around the world, to stay the course. It is when we're saying that the Russian invasion in Ukraine poses an existential challenge to our world and to our values, then the response would have to be equally serious. And I wouldn't agree more with my dear friend that it has to be a pan-European response. Individual states, Bulgaria in this case, as was mentioned, does not have the capacity to address the challenge if left alone. They cannot do it. And they are paying a heavy price for defending our common European values. So we have to support them, we have to help them. And that goes for everybody around. And also I have to say, we have to be bold and also understand the mechanism, because in my mind, the level of the price of electricity nowadays does not make any sense. And this has to be addressed. And if we would like to keep our societies with us at times of inflation and at times of rising inequality, we have to perform, or else we're going to see a populist backlash, and the whole environment in Europe, the whole political environment in Europe will change substantially.
Just picking up on Katarina's point, do you sense very strongly that the public, even though it's virtually impossible at the moment, expects that political leaders in this new environment will fix it?
Well, the public expects, rightly so, for the political leadership to come with a rational response and explain what they are doing and be able to facilitate addressing the challenge. Or else the public would change leadership. That's the rule of democracy.
All right, let me go to a view from Hungary, to Péter Szijjártó. You've had an election this year. You're relatively secure in the sense that you know that for the next 3 or 4 years, there'll be no challenge to the government. Therefore, you're not facing an electoral cycle. And you have special relationships with Russia on gas. There was one signed almost a year ago. I say that because in the end, do you think that somehow Hungary is going to escape the kind of privations that are certainly threatening in many of the European nations?
As far as I understand correctly, I'm representing the only neighboring country to Ukraine this time. And I have to tell you that we as a neighboring country are faced with the challenges of the impacts of the war a little bit even more than those who are a little bit further away. We have received almost 1 million refugees so far from Ukraine, and that number is really telling about the tragedy which is going on in the neighboring country of ours. So therefore, our position in Hungary sounds to be very simple, but in order to reach that, there's a very complicated way to go forward, which is peace. So the only solution for all the challenges we could list here, when it comes to the economic impacts, when it comes to the energy-related impacts, when it comes to the individual tragedies of the families who have to leave their homes, the only solution for that is peace. So that's why we usually argue in the debates what kind of answer Europe or European Union should give to this conflict from this perspective. We always support those initiatives which seem to be able to bring peace, and we dislike those ones which rather lead to the escalation of the conflict. The other aspect, which I'd like to offer for you as a matter of consideration, is that we do think that we should make decisions and measures in Europe which are not more painful to ourselves than to those against whom we are addressing those measures. And this correlates pretty much to the second part of your question, which is regarding energy. Regarding energy, are we dependent on the Russian sources? We have to speak honestly. Yes, we are.
You have a special deal
No,
signed a year ago.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not special. Many other countries have long-term contracts with Russia. Some of us on the stage as well, so please do not try to circulate, let's say, fake kind of perceptions as if our agreement with Russia would be special. It's not. It's a 15-year-long contract. Similar to this contract, many other European countries have long-term contracts with the Russians. By the way, if we had not signed that deal, now we would be in a very, very deep problem, because our annual gas consumption is 10 billion cubic meters, out of which 8.5 billion cubic meters must be imported. Now, given the infrastructural determinations in the region, we are mostly dependent on the Russians. Does it make fun for us? No, it does not. Would we want to be more diversified? Yes, we would. But the problem is that the supply of energy is neither ideological nor political issue. That's a purely physical and mathematical issue. Physical in a way that you need to have a source which must be accessible through some infrastructure. On the other hand, it's mathematical because you need a volume which you have to buy. And you know what? If one of the biggest American and the biggest Austrian company in energy sector, which had the right to exploit one of the biggest new possible sources in Central Europe, namely in Romania in the Black Sea, had they decided to exploit that gas, the whole geography in Central Europe regarding energy supply would be totally different. But since the Americans and the Austrians decided to leave that project, there's no potential big new source in the region for us to be accessed. So why we buy gas from Russia? Because physically we can't buy it from anywhere else, regardless of the fact that we have built interconnectors with 6 of the 7 neighboring countries, regardless of the fact that we are the #1 customer of the Krk LNG port, and regardless of the fact that we had a 3 billion cubic meter annual contract with the Americans and the Austrians, which they have walked away from just very recently. This is a clear situation. This is a physical issue. That's why we never supported the energy sanctions and will not support the energy sanctions. And when we do not support the energy sanctions, it doesn't have any kind of Russian aspect. It's a pure Hungarian aspect. because otherwise we would not be able to supply the country. Physically, it's impossible. This is the true situation.
Let's move into the broader issues of challenges for Europe. Minister from Croatia, Minister Radman, what is your view? Your Prime Minister was here earlier as well. What's your view about how much domestic political pressure are you feeling under? The expectations, you're still almost recovering from a war, and there's still the stabilization which still has to be done. Everything's moving very strongly, but in many ways, you've still got the issue of where marginal revenue is going, where marginal income is going, whether people can afford it, and the impact that there might be on you nationally, but also on Europe regionally.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, yeah, we are well experienced, and what has been happening right now in Ukraine, unfortunately, it was the same scenario 30 years ago, and followed by the Milosevic regime and great Serbian aggression, however, and we succeeded, and in that time we achieved our foreign policy goals, namely on membership in EU, NATO, and others international very important organizations. However, my Prime Minister and myself, so we visited Ukraine for the very beginning, and we are a vocal proponent of showing solidarity, and we condemned and then strongly the Russian aggression on Ukraine. Of course, although they have the crisis in Ukraine, the dreadful crisis in Ukraine, brought about the security crisis and migration crisis, but also in the insecurity in the food supply and energy shortage. However, we should show our solidarity to Ukraine, and however, it was a good test and proof how we are European Union. Are we solidar? Are we on the right track in the history? So my Prime Minister also spoke about dual approach. So there is the right side, democracy, and authoritarian regime, like Putin and the others. However, the negative impacts and implication, of course, we are also still have, and we have to show our resilience and to find the best instrument to phase out our dependency on Russian energy, gas, oil, and so on. And in the 21st century, of course, that so no one meant that something could happen with this Russian aggression, one sovereign country against a sovereign country. That means the international law is violated, and we have to show our solidarity in order just to keep the democracy, to keep European values, to keep human rights. There is no price for that. And we have been suffering, of course, to some extent, but it is a sign that, and probably signal that we should just to wake up and to find the instruments, leverage how to deal with. First of all, we are looking forward that Russians should withdraw their troops, their soldiers, and to recognize sovereignty of Ukraine. So we have to engage ourselves in diplomatic, political way. Of course, and having this in mind, our citizens in Croatia, also they show our solidarity. We know that what we are our experience. So we know how to live with them, with the Ukrainians. Probably not like Hungary. Hungary received almost 1 million refugees, but Hungary has also the Hungarian minority in Ukraine. But also we received also about 30,000 Ukrainian citizens.
Let me ask you to think more broadly now. There's one question here from Daniel Voda, how the ministers are seeing Europe in a decade. When you think where we were a decade ago, what is happening now was simply never imaginable. Even if you think back to August 2021, a year ago, much of what we're confronting it was simply not on the radar screen, even though Putin had delivered his July the 7th statement warning of what he was likely to do. But I say that because you're all politicians. You have to deal with, you can always react to something. But what about what you're seeing coming down the track, not in 10 years, but maybe in 10 months or 10 weeks? And the pressures you're going to be under with the timelines being dramatically foreshortened, which immediately create a public expectation that you'll be able to do something. The unthinkable is happening in many ways, the unpalatable. And I'm just wondering if I can push you to think about where we might be in a few weeks and a few months. Take it to January or February, and the kind of political dilemmas and difficulties you're going to be dealing with. Katarina.
I'm not in the national government anymore.
But you are in a parliament.
Yes. Well, you asked, can we fix it? We can't fix it completely. And the challenge is that we have to bring this across, that we have to, on the one hand, really get the means that are there where they are needed, which means, of course, the people who are in existential need, to maybe, as some member states do, take away means from those companies who earn loads of money with this situation, without them even wanting to do so, but it just happens. So take the money there and give it to those who are in need. So you really have to have an eye on the social balance. And the second part is as I already mentioned, is communication, and you said it too. And we have to start with this right now, because there is a real danger of Putin not winning this war militarily, but then winning it. That is, of course, his aim. Now, he's not doing well militarily, but he wants to get as close as he can to winter and then have that chaos as a weapon. And we have to, at least in Germany, Edi Rama spoke a lot about Germany this morning. There is a real will in the population to do so. And there are, of course, a lot of people who will not like it, but who can still deal with higher energy prices. But you have to take care of those who are really badly in need. You have to do that in every country.
Let me keep pushing you. What is on your risk agenda of what you may have to face as governments, what you may have to face as politicians, as ministers, responsible to your Prime Minister and therefore to the electorate, about what might be coming down the track? We've survived the pandemic. It doesn't appear to be coming back at the moment, but there are many medical reasons why it could be coming back as well. In other words, there's just this overwhelming sense that nothing is stable and everything is threatening the wealth, the values, the ability of people to enjoy their lives. I mean, I say that in Bled, where after all it's a glorious place to be on a day like this, but actually it's easy to forget what is now coming down the track. You're sort of smiling at me, Minister. Are you thinking that I'm being too dramatic?
No, but asking us...
Would you like to press the button?
Asking us what we're going to confront and what kind of challenges we may face.
That's the title of the session,
it is,
Challenges.
Yeah, true. I mean, I was smiling because I was thinking that the best of my dreams in the last 3 months was I slept one night and I thought I was the Foreign Minister of Luxembourg. So it was so nice. But then I woke up again, I was still the Foreign Minister of Greece, having to be next to a difficult neighbor, Turkey, with total instability in the East Mediterranean, and having to address the consequences of the Russian invasion to Ukraine. So the challenges we may face, they're numerous. I mean, if you start thinking what may happen to you, really you won't go to sleep. What we should do is try to think in an optimist way and try to see how we can address what's already on the table. Russian invasion and consequences is one of them. Not for us, Greece, not the only one. Please let me just tell you that we're 20 minutes flying time from Libya, and Libya is a failed state. As of yesterday, there were fights for a militia trying to enter Tripoli by force. Syria is an hour's flight, again, a failed state. The Sahel is 1.5 hour flight, it's a terrorist nightmare. So you understand what I mean? If we're trying to create bad scenario, this is an endless process. What we should do is concentrate on the challenge we have at the table, try to address them in the best of ways, and as the Brits say, keep calm and carry on.
Now I know why you wanted to become Prime Minister of Luxembourg.
No. No, being foreign minister would be great. I mean, Jan Asselborn is doing...
This one won't leave, the one that we have. Yeah. He's not about to leave after 28 years.
I would agree with my colleague and friend here that it's very difficult to think about all the possibilities of what can happen together. If you think of them in isolation, it's bad enough. If you think them together, it becomes very difficult to sleep. But I would say that for us, it's much more likely realistically in the next year to have a sequence of continuous elections without finding stability internally. And that is a breeding ground for even more extreme views or of people who are dissatisfied with everything. And that's a self-perpetuating process where it's really the challenge that many countries can face. And we've seen that the lack of stability in countries where we had coalition governments, where it was difficult to bring a common agenda, that would be even more challenging. And once you have that instability, it's very, very hard to be able to adhere to the broader values of maintaining solidarity in the long term. So for me, what will happen in the next year or 10 years, it really depends on what do we do now. And I would agree here with my colleague Peter about how close and how quickly we reach.
But can you really
there.
see 10 years ahead, do you think? Given where we were 10 years ago and nothing of what's happened in the last 10 years has really been on the agenda.
I think I heard in the previous panel that thought that we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I don't actually agree with this. I think with that thinking, we're always in a response mode. I think if we honestly start talking about what, and then address our issues with China or the potential ones, when we start building scenarios, the worst or the best, and really address those as a union rather than individual problems of countries, then we might be in a better situation. Otherwise, it will always be unpredictable and we would always be reacting. So I think it is possible if we really start future-proofing and future planning.
Do you find there's a culture inside your government and also among your public servants to think beyond that bridge before you get there?
I think it's been difficult, and I mean, that's, I guess, the difficulty of democracy. When you have constantly changing governments, people are used to think in the next term, in the next 2 to 4 years. And when the political elite has set that way of thinking, it's very difficult to convince people to think of global issues, and issues that might appear in the next 10, 20 years. But this, I think, comes with the ability to secure the basic needs of society. You can instill the need to think of a longer term perspective when you're able to satisfy and to meet the immediate needs. When this is not happening, it's very, very difficult for people to ever want to engage in longer term visions. And for us, we really, as a union, have to find ways to achieve that basic needs and to satisfy these basic needs of our society so that they can think longer term. They would support political regimes that can provide for them a longer term stability. Otherwise, it will be a continuous change of governments, always finding someone to blame. And I think finding an enemy to blame doesn't help. And that's what we are perpetuating.
Peter Szijjártó, I mentioned the election, 4 months ago now. I mean, does that change, does that give you a sense of stability about how to plan, even if you're having to confront the Danube being at very low levels and so many issues which you weren't thinking about back in April? But does it give you a sense of security?
Look,
political
stability definitely helps. We have won the 4th continuous election, all 4 of them with a 2/3 majority. It's a non-coalition government. Our party occupies more than 2/3 of the seats in the parliament. This is sometimes called as dictatorship in the European media, but since this is based on the will of the Hungarian people, this is an unfair judgment, let's put it this way. But that definitely helps. If you can make decisions quickly, then under the crisis circumstances, that can be very helpful. If I look back to the last 12 or 13 years, the time we have spent in office, we had to face many challenges, including the migration crisis, COVID, its economic impacts, and now the war. And if you look back to each crisis, I remember that we always thought that that is the worst thing that can happen to us regarding the past and the future. And then the next crisis has proved that no, that was a bad crisis, but there can be even worse. And when we just got over COVID and its tremendous economic impacts, then a very legitimate expectation of my generation became a naive illusion, namely that we have to experience war in our neighborhood. So that's why I would say that time is definitely not on our side. Time is working against us. That's why we have to find a solution very, very quickly, how to create peace in our neighborhood. Otherwise, Europe will lose a lot. Because I'd like to tell you about my experience, and I don't know whether the others agree or have the similar kind of experience. But whenever I'm in contact with non-European or non-North American partners and colleagues of ours, believe me, the European description of this situation, the European narrative, is failed. So we are beaten in the international political arena. In Europe or in North America, we might think that the scenario, the narrative we build about this whole very bad situation around us is valid. But outside of Europe and outside of North America, mostly, this is not the narrative what others believe. That's why I think that it is the real vital interest of Europe to make peace as soon as possible.
But you don't believe that's possible at the moment?
Sorry?
There are no signals, apart from what I was talking to the Turkish foreign minister about, with the grain, which is producing a degree of confidence.
Yeah, well, look, I think we all, sorry to say that, but we all have to be thankful to the Turkish. Because they are the only ones so far whose initiative was successful in order to make a communication bridge between the two parties and reach some agreement on some issue. All other initiatives of whoever failed. Only the Turkish were successful in this regard so far, for which we have to be thankful. And you have asked at the beginning what kind of Europe should be there or might be there in the upcoming 10 years. I think that the current situation must make one thing very clear to all of us in the European Union. We do have to enlarge this integration, because the bigger we are, the stronger we are. And if you are not able to integrate some newcomers, especially in the Western Balkans, then we will lose even more, because all the conflicts, all the crises in the region have shown that if we are bigger, then we are stronger. And I do believe that this current situation must show very, very clearly that if we are not able to integrate the Western Balkans, then we will have to suffer other strategic losses in the future.
But you'd accept at the moment the Visegrad process is under challenge, is rocky.
You mean the cooperation within the Visegrad group? The Visegrad cooperation is a strong cooperation with very strong foundations. And we have maybe one of the secrets of that is that we have a common understanding, that we represent a common position on issues where we can, and we respect the differing position of each other where we can't make a common platform. This is very simple. We always had issues to which we have approached differently. Of course, during war, all kinds of issues like this are more visible or spectacular. Let's put it this way, we might have different approaches on different issues, but this remains a very, very strong integration. And the Polish-Hungarian brotherhood will remain very strong as well, although I understand that there are a lot of actors within Europe who would like to kill this relationship and the Visegrad cooperation as well.
Minister, first of all on Visegrad, give us your view, but also the bigger challenge of, are you prepared to see the impossibility of some things coming down the track and not knowing what to do with it at the moment? In other words, how you handle that?
Thank you very much, and that's a very good question. Having in mind our geopolitical position, Southeast Europe or Middle Europe, we are small countries, but we have so many identities geographically. And we are a Mediterranean country, we are a Middle European country, we are a Danube country, and but we are very close to Western Balkan. Western Balkans is the challenge, the enlargement, European Union should be more present there. These 6 countries belong to an, because it's just a spot. It should not be the black hole, however, but it must be integrated in the European Union, in NATO, and so on. The countries, 6 countries, are surrounded by the members of the European Union and NATO. But we have to prevent, to avert any form of ongoing or possible escalation, or the impact of first of all, the third countries, and possibility that spillover process or domino effects coming from Ukraine is possible. There are countries which is candidate country, and the one country that didn't condemn Russian aggression and doesn't follow the European, the common foreign security policy. But it's very important. Either if you would like to be a member of European Union, you can to follow the European values and not to sit on the 2 chairs. It is less conform.
Now we have 15 minutes to run. Do send me any more questions. I've got a couple here. One about the green transition and one about energy companies. But what I'd like to know is whether there's something, a big idea any of you have got, which is this is the big challenge, but this is what we've really got to do, and we've got to do it quickly. Because President von der Leyen was very clear about the greening and the green initiatives. You know all the details. But do you fear that the green initiatives are going to be diluted because of what's happening, because of the economic impact, the social impact, the social disillusionment, the fear about jobs and so on? Or is the green agenda, the sustainability agenda, the countering the climate emergency agenda going to be as resolute as it is at the moment?
Just may I have a small comment on what Peter said before? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Peter was right. We are thankful to Turkey for the assistance on the Black Sea grain initiative. But there's a big but. But Turkey is the NATO member that has not imposed one piece of sanctions on Russia. And Russia is using the Turkish economy as a way out of the European sanctions.
We put that to the foreign minister earlier.
So I know the Turkish position quite well, and Mevlut is a friend of mine, so I know his position as well. But Mevlut should say what he should say, but the truth is there. So, and I'm not presenting that as an anti-Turkish argument. The problem is that if you allow exit holes into a sanctions policy, then sanctions do not work or need longer term to work. That's the point there.
Right,
now, let's go back on the green now.
Sustainability.
Sustainability. Well, my humble opinion
Given the enormity of what we've been going through.
Yeah, my humble opinion is that green transition is not a killer of jobs and is not a killer of growth. It's exactly the opposite. It's a job creator and a growth creator. If, for example, John Kerry was in Athens this morning and we were discussing, and he asked me one question, which is the #1 number of jobs created in the United States? And you know what it is? Turbine engineers. Turbine engineers for wind power. So we can address the green transition as a positive aspect of creating a more inclusive, more just, more sustainable economy. And we should not, if you allow me to repeat, we should not use the Ukraine crisis as a killer of our transition process towards a greener economy.
Because Marko Komac here says, how green is the EU's green transition really? Is it really green?
Well, it is a little grey, maybe a little brown, but we have to make it greener. And we have agendas, we have the 2030 agenda, we have the 2050 agenda. But again, it's not a choice. Climate change is here, is upon us. Unless we understand that, we will be killing the planet. We cannot survive if we have 3 degrees Celsius change of temperature. I mean, the level of the sea will be at the level of the Acropolis. So we will not survive.
Really?
Oh, yes. Acropolis is just 80 meters above the sea level. Imagine Acropolis within a lake. So
That's why I went like that.
no, it will not be a nice environment.
Well, first of all, I think my neighbor would be disappointed if I didn't react to what he said, because I'm quite known as a critic of the Hungarian government. And I think to say 4 times 2/3 is only half of the truth, because if you have an electoral law that you can have 2/3 with not even 50% of the votes, which was one of the elections, and you change the electoral laws or even further every time, then that is maybe also easier to achieve. But and the other point is that I believe one of the existential challenges that we will be facing in 10 years is exactly what is always our, of course, point of conflict, is that we have to find this glue that Tanja Fajon talked about this morning. And this glue is our democracy, our values, our understanding of rule of law, and a common understanding of the rule of law. And if we have 1 or 2 countries who decide to define the rule of law differently to all the others, then that will not last for another 10 years. That is the one thing that, of course, I had to say if I'm sitting next to my colleague, with all due respect. And the other point is, of course, yes, peace. We all want peace. But if on the short term we have to suffer a certain damage, but on the long run we would suffer a much greater damage if we didn't impose sanctions, and if we were not this time really tough on Putin and his regime, then I think this is also too short.
But quickly, if you can, Katarina.
But then to the green, just
green,
one
quickly,
sentence
please.
to the green, because the green transition, of course, is object to massive lobbying, as well as social achievements. Because, of course, now you have the people who never wanted it in the first place, who now say, and we as a parliament fought hard for what we achieved, and who now say, look, of course, okay, we decided on all of that, but now is not the time anymore. And this is exactly the point where we have to decide, is that what we want? And I completely agree with my Greek colleague. This is the way we have to go, not only for environmental reasons, but also for economic reasons, and of course for existential reasons. So we have to be very severe here, as well as on social issues, because the same thing is happening there, that people now say we can't afford all of this, that we have already decided upon. And these are the vital questions: the democracy question, the rule of law question, the environmental question, and the social questions. These are the questions that will define if in 10 years we will still have a European Union.
Peter Szijjártó, can you clarify for the record, your Prime Minister was in Houston a couple of weeks ago with Donald Trump. Does that mean that your government is actually actively moving towards the rejection of Paris?
I was there with the Prime Minister to accompany him on his meeting in New Jersey with President Trump. But beforehand, I just want to say that I think that in international relations, what we miss the most currently, and it's really painful, is mutual respect. Because I would never be brave enough to criticize the electoral systems of other countries, because, for example, in the United States, you can become a president even if you lose the vote. There are countries in Europe where there's no exact number of MPs as an outcome of an election. There's another very strong and powerful European country where if you win the election only by 0.1%, you got additional seats to have half of the seats at least in the parliament. Or there's another country where you get 100 bonus seats if you win the election regardless of the margin. In our case, we got more than 54% of the votes recently. Show me one another party, show me one another political group in Europe who can make it. 54% of the votes on our own, regardless of the fact that the whole opposition, from the fascists to the communists, through the liberals, have united. So I think mutual respect is very important. I would be never brave enough to comment domestic issues of other countries. We have won elections in 2010, 14, 18, 22, under 3 different types of electoral systems. In all systems. So, but this is one. This is domestic issues.
I think we should record.
Okay. Regarding
I think the OSCE calls the Hungarian elections free but not fair.
Yeah, but this
It's
is
the
a fake.
OSCE.
This is a political judgment. Liberal and socialist
We're talking about
politicians-
green. We're talking about green at the moment.
Sorry?
We're talking about green at the moment.
But how does the electoral system of Hungary come to the green issues? I don't understand. But okay, I come
You
back.
start.
Okay, I come back to the green issue. So I think that making the energy system of Europe green is vital, as long as it is not an ideological or political issue, but a rational one. And here nuclear power comes into the question. Because we do believe that without nuclear, it will be impossible to reduce the emission in Europe, and in the meantime, to help economy grow. In Hungary...
Can I just be very specific about the question?
Please.
That image of your Prime Minister with Mr. Trump in the United States 2 weeks ago, at a time when he's pushing very hard on the reject Paris Agreement.
No, it was not on the agenda. No.
Okay.
It was not on the agenda. We were the first ones in Europe, by the way. No, this is like fake news. But we were the first ones in Europe to ratify the Paris Agreement.
Okay, well, I just wanted
and
to
we take it very... No, we take it very seriously.
Right, well, I wanted to check that you're not...
No, of course. Okay. We take it very seriously, but we do believe that without nuclear, the Green Deal is impossible. So that's why we are now building a new nuclear power plant, which will double the nuclear capacity of the country, which will help us to continue to grow the economy, which will help us to keep the utility costs still under control, regardless of the global turbulences in this regard. So as long as it is not an ideological question, we are on board. And nuclear must be respected, because nuclear is a safe, cheap, and sustainable way of generating...
All right, we've got 5 minutes left. Green. Is green at risk at the moment because of the turbulence that there is now across Europe?
It's one of those, just like with any other long-term goals, it's at risk of losing track over time. We react very well when we have immediate pressure of having to change something. How do we find a mechanism to keep ourselves accountable to that agenda? I'm someone who came into politics from infectious diseases and sustainable development goals, and they've been around for a long time, but the pressure of them always comes on the agenda when there is an epidemic or pandemic, and then people talk about building resilient systems. We shouldn't really be following the same logic here. For us as a country, we've had one of the greenest recovery and resilience plans with a lot of focus on hydrogen, on other renewable sources. But in order to be able to maintain the momentum for that long-term goal, we really need to address the short-term needs that we have. So for me, yes, it could be possible if we really find a mechanism and put them in place to keep ourselves active going forward, unitedly active, rather than individual countries pushing forward their own agenda. When the pressure of the war, when the pressure of the high prices is off, can we still keep that agenda going at the same time? What will be our pressure? In my experience, we always talk about until the pressure is on our border, until the pressure is in our homes, we are always a lot less sensitive to it in the long term. So we really need to find those mechanisms that would work for us longer terms to be, in a way, protecting ourselves from our own lack of keeping.
All right, there's a comment here from Ava Ray. How are you going to combat the companies and the money that's in the coal and fuel industry in order to fully switch to clean energy? Also, how will you convince China and the USA to do the same? I mean, it's a question which gets asked frequently, but is that now being diluted? Any of you, is that being diluted?
If I could just finish on that, I think here I would build on a point that my Greek colleague said about green should not become a price to pay. It should be an opportunity to really further for both economic opportunities, but also opportunities for those companies. I mean, BP is one of the companies that invests in renewable sources as well. These companies are transitioning as well. What's the incentive for them to do that is another matter. But if it becomes an incentive, if it becomes a path through which there are much more opportunities than cost to bear, both for private sector but also for societies, that's how we can achieve that.
All right, quickly, Minister Radman, again, the green agenda, is it at risk at the moment?
Yes, but however...
To some extent, yes.
But just carefully with this, of course. First of all, the European Union, we recently in spring adopted the strategic compass, with this historic document with 47 pages, and the climate change and green transition found a very important place in this document. That means, like, so I agreed with, fully agreed with Madam President and Nikos Minister that there are European values, and as we, it depends on us, how we, the member states, the countries, just we follow this guidance as a part of this very important document for the next decade. So in the 10 years, for example, your question was, sorry, that, so I know what will happen, however, but if I would alive, so I will be 74, and that, so we will see then.
But I don't want to put words in his mouth or your mouth, Minister, but if you were seeing John Kerry this morning, whether privately or publicly, he is saying we are still not moving fast enough. And it is now into a danger zone. Net zero is not enough. Is that the kind of message you were getting from him this morning?
Yes. Honestly speaking, I got it last night as well, because we had dinner together.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's the morning or the
so it was
night.
both private and public. The truth is, look, it is something like 65 of the world GDP has reached an agreement that if we stick by this agreement, then it's possible that we stay around 1.5 Celsius degrees. But there's another 35 remaining of the world GDP, which includes China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, and a few other countries.
But did he say very clearly, we are not going fast enough?
Yes, he did.
Last word.
I think it's not only an opportunity, it's a necessity. And I think especially China is living that at the moment. They have to cut off electricity in large parts of the country because they don't have enough. We see France, which is largely dependent on nuclear energy, which has to switch off half of its power plants because the rivers are heating up, they can't cool them anymore. So I think nature is dictating us what we have to do, and it's very clear and very explicit. So I completely agree to John Kerry and my Greek colleague.
Is there a challenge we've missed in the last hour? Or have we had enough challenges before?
I would say the challenge of keeping optimistic with all the challenges that we've listed.
Nice one. Let's be realistic. Can I thank you all very much indeed? We haven't answered every question, but they're going to be, these questions are still going to be coming up, and apologies if we missed anything out. I've tried to reflect the few messages I got from you, but this is going to be continued at 8:30 tomorrow morning at the Rickley Balance Hotel. How many futures for the European Union in one session, and Europe's eastern neighbourhood knocking on the EU's door. And you're probably in desperate need of something to drink and eat. And there is a reception at the Rickley Balance Hotel up the hill for those of you who feel they need some kind of lightness and optimism, as we heard from the Bulgarian representative. Thank you all very much indeed. See you tomorrow.